The people at the Wildlife Rescue Center couldn't believe what they saw. Leopard, the African spotted leopard that had been shy and scared for 3 months, sat still in the corner of his cage. His eyes were alert, but they didn't show the fear that they usually do. A man in a green and black plaid shirt and faded pants stood still on the other side of the wire mesh. Leopard never took his eyes off of this stranger. He stared at them with wide-open amber eyes and ears perked up to show that he was paying close attention. Leopard slowly stood up. His strong but smooth body tensed up to show that he was alert, but there were no signs of fear or violence. He walked slowly towards a wire mesh, never taking his eyes off of the man. Michael Harrison was as still as a rock, and his heart was beating fast. He had gone all the way to the other side of the world in the dim hope that Leopard was still alive and that they still had a special bond. The feeling in Michael's voice made him whisper, "Do you remember me?" There was a miracle between them when they were only a few steps apart. In Leopard's amber eyes there was a hint of recognition. What's the story behind this sad moment? What kind of link could happen between a wild leopard and a researcher that goes beyond species? What did happen during those dark months when leopards stopped being in the African reserve? Before we can understand this amazing moment, we have to go back to the beginning. A single figure moved through the tall grass in the golden light of late afternoon. Leopard walked like a king or queen. His spotted coat sparkled in the sun, and his amber eyes carefully watched every move in his kingdom. The male cat was fully grown, and he was beautiful in a way that only nature could make. Leopard had lived in this park for 7 years. Researchers there gave him a name when he was a cub so they could keep track of his growth from a small, clumsy animal to a great hunter. And Michael Harrison was the one who had the most ties to Leopard. At age 55, Michael had spent 20 years of his life guarding beautiful animals like Leopard. His hair was already turning silver, and he had deep wrinkles on his tanned face. When Michael found Leopard hurt and scared in a poacher's trap, they became close. As his nature would have told him to run away, Leopard looked straight into Michael's eyes as if he were judging this man's soul, and Michael did not let him down. With unusually calm and kind patience, he set the leopard free, took care of his wounds, and then let him go. Ever since, a strange bond has grown between them. Leopard stayed wild and free, but when Michael was working in the reserve, the leopard would sometimes show up, watching from a safe distance and clearly interested. That he would sometimes let Michael get closer than other leopards would be a quiet way of saying thank you for what he had done. Michael's co-worker, Dr. Elena Romero, couldn't believe what she saw when she saw one of these meetings. Even though she had studied leopards for 15 years, she had never seen a person and a wild leopard interact in this way. Michael always had a strong, steady voice when he talked to Leopard. He would talk about the stars, faraway places he had been, and his family in England, whom he left many years ago to follow his dream of protecting wildlife. Leopard would either sit or lay down, and his amber eyes would look at Michael carefully, as if they really understood everything he said. But then a terrible day came. A group of poachers broke into the area while Michael was not there. With modern tools and an endless supply of cruelty, they went after the leopard, a beautiful animal with spotted fur that makes it stand out. Tiger's kingdom, an iron cage, and a tranquilizer dart were all stolen in one night. When Michael came back and found out that she had gone missing, he was devastated. Leopard was more than just a test subject for him. He was everything Michael fought to protect. He started a search campaign that included conservation groups from around the world, but every day there was less chance that Leopard would be found. Michael didn't give up. He would often sit on a high rock with a view of the grassland on full moon nights to think about his lost friend. He would then say into the night that he would find Leopard no matter what it took. Lion woke up in a small, dark room. He could smell cold metal, people, and strange mechanical sounds all around him, which made him feel very unsafe. He still didn't remember much after taking the tranquilizer, but his desire to stay alive told him to find a way out. But there was no way out. He was cut off from the rest of the world by solid iron bars. Leopard was in jail for the first time in his life. He was the king of the African plains. The trip he took was terrible. From a truck with a lid to the dark cargo hold of an airplane and back to another truck. At each stage, he was moved from one cage to the next without him knowing where he would end up. He was given just enough food and water to stay alive, but not enough to keep him strong. Leopard's toned muscles started to lose their shape over time, and the proud light in his eyes started to fade. Leopard finally got to a place that was colder than any other place he had ever been. It was full of gray buildings, and the air was heavy with smoke and metal. In Eastern Europe, this was an illegal wildlife holding center where valuable animals like leopard were kept as pets for people's pleasure and profit. Leopard's new cage was bigger than the transport cage, but it was still a prison. The cold concrete floor instead of the soft earth and the sharp artificial light instead of the soft moonlight made him feel like he was in jail. Around him, other animals were going through the same thing: sad Siberian tigers, screaming African lions, and many other rare animals that had been taken away from their freedom. Leopard fought back in the beginning. He screamed and smashed against the bars, looking for weak spots. But as he realized these actions were pointless, he stopped talking. He wasn't giving up, but he was waiting for a chance, no matter how small. He had new visitors every day. They pointed, spoke in languages I didn't understand, and sometimes took pictures with flashes that were too bright to see. Leopard learned to hide in the darkest part of his cage to avoid being seen. When the lights went out and the building got dark, he would look through the small wall window, where he could sometimes see a patch of night sky with faraway stars. Leopard thought about the wide plains, how the wind felt on his fur, and how the earth and grass smelt after it had rained. In rare dreams, he would remember another person as a man with a warm, deep voice and pale blue eyes that didn't show fear or greed, but instead showed respect and something Leopard didn't know how to describe but could feel: kindness. In Africa, Michael never stopped looking either. He followed weak leads, rumors about wildlife shipments and poaching, and any other information that could take him to Leopard. He didn't give up, even though hope was fading every day. He worked with both local authorities and foreign animal protection groups. Elena was afraid for Michael's health. He didn't eat or sleep much because he was so focused on finding Leopard. Many people saw it as an unhealthy obsession, but Michael saw it as a duty, a quiet promise to the creature that had put its trust in him. Then a beam of light showed up. The facility where Leopard was being kept was found during an investigation into a global wildlife trafficking network. A raid was planned by international police forces. At night, the night of the raid, Leopard was curled up in the corner of his cage to stay warm in the very cold winter in Eastern Europe. All of a sudden, sirens, bright lights, and human screams broke the silence. He hid deeper in the corner out of fear because he didn't know if this was a new threat or a chance to get away. A new group of people showed up in front of Leopard's cage after hours of chaos. They didn't have the smell of his kidnappers. They talked and moved in different ways. A woman walked up to them slowly and calmly, and her voice was soft. Leopard couldn't understand what she said, but he could tell she loved him more than anyone else. Leopard was then taken to an animal rescue center over the next few days. This prison had more room and better living conditions than the last one he was in, but it was still not home. The relief workers saw that Leopard wasn't just hurt physically, but also mentally. He wouldn't eat, stayed away from people, and spent most of his time hiding in the dark. Conservationists around the world heard about the rescue, and one day Michael was checking his email when he saw a picture of a spotted leopard that looked eerily like someone he knew. His heart beat fast when he saw the one-of-a-kind spot design that he had been studying for years. It was Leopard. It was thinner and had new scars, but it was still living. You wouldn't expect to find an African leopard at an animal rescue center in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., but that's where Leopard was getting better after being held captive for a long time. The staff at the center kept the name Leopard that they found in the records that went with him, even though they didn't know that Michael had given him that name. They were doing everything they could to help him get better. Leopard had been there for 3 months, but they weren't making much progress. He still wouldn't interact with people, and he would often hide in the farthest part of his special living space. Even though his physical health had gotten better, the mental scars were still there. His eyes, which used to shine with pride, now showed fear and suspicion. Sarah Thompson, who worked at the center as an animal behaviorist, would sit near Leopard's area for hours every day, never getting too close but always being there. She read books sometimes and just watched other times. Leopard started to hide less and less when she was around, which was a small but positive sign. At the same time, Michael Harrison had made the long trip from Africa to the U.S. After making sure through thorough photos that this was really his leopard, Michael had to get past a lot of legal and administrative hurdles before he could meet the leopard. Many people in the conservation community didn't believe Michael when he said that a wild leopard could recognize a person even after being away from them for months. But Michael knew that the link between him and Leopard was deeper than science could explain. There was an unseen thread that tied them together with trust and respect. It was a clear fall day when Michael got to the rescue center. As he and Sarah walked to Leopard's area, soft yellow leaves fell all over the grounds. His heart was racing, partly because he was excited and partly because he was afraid the leopard might forget about him. Sarah said that they had thought of everything, but Leopard had been through a lot of bad things, so his response might not be what they were expecting. Michael tried to hide his worry by nodding. They got to a place where they could watch with a safety fence made of wire mesh and looked into Leopard's living space. Leopard wasn't seen at first. Sarah pointed to the rocks where Leopard liked to hide and then left Michael alone. Leopard felt better when there was only one person around. When Sarah left, Michael stood still and looked at the living room that was made to look like a natural setting. A small movement caught his attention after a while. Leopard was slowly coming out from where he was hiding, keeping a close eye on everything around him. Michael didn't breathe. This was still his leopard, even though it was thinner and had new scars. It was powerful and beautiful in a way that only nature could make. "Hello, friend," Michael said in a low voice, still not believing what he was seeing. Leopard stopped when it heard the familiar voice. His ears perked up as he turned his head towards Michael. The air had changed, and he could smell, hear, or feel something. His body remembered it, even though his mind might not have. Leopard walked up to the wire mesh with his eyes on Michael. There was no instant sign of recognition. There was only a quiet interest. Michael couldn't move, so the leopard had time to get used to seeing him. Michael asked in a soft voice, "Do you remember me? I've been looking for you everywhere." The miracle then took place. While Leopard was just a few steps away from the wire mesh, his eyes changed. Not out of fear or doubt, but because they recognized him. His stiff body slowly started to loosen up, and his tail started to sway gently. Sarah couldn't believe what she saw from afar through security cams. Not only was Leopard not scared or angry, he was also reacting to Michael in a way that no other person had ever done before. Over the next few weeks, Leopard changed in a very noticeable way. With Michael's regular presence, Leopard slowly got his trust back. He started to eat more often, pay more attention to his surroundings, and even let Sarah get closer. Sarah had never seen a wild animal change so quickly after being hurt. She began writing down every step for study on Leopard's ability to recover mentally and on the amazing power of the bond between people and animals. Michael and the protection team started to make plans for the next step, which was to bring Leopard back to Africa, where he belonged. Everyone agreed that it was best for Leopard, even though it wasn't easy. 6 months after their first meeting, a special cargo plane touched down at an African reserve's nearby small airport. Leopard was moving around in a special transport cage, and Michael was sitting next to him and talking the whole time to keep Leopard quiet. As soon as they got to the reserve, a special area had been set aside for Leopard to get used to being freely roaming again. Leopard carefully stepped out of the cage when the door opened, his nose taking in the smell of home. Michael stood nearby with tears running down his face. "Welcome home," he said lightly. Lion looked at the man who had saved his life twice. Their eyes met for a moment. It wasn't between a person and an animal, but between two souls who had crossed species, language, and space to be with each other. After giving a small nod as if to say goodbye, Leopard turned and walked towards the huge fields that were ahead. Michael knew that as he continued to work as a conservationist in this area for years to come, he would sometimes catch a glimpse of a spotted figure watching from afar. A lesson that real friendship can get through anything. In his wild heart, Leopard would always remember the man who stood in front of him that terrible day and showed him that not all people are foes. Leopard had not been back to the African plains for 5 years. It was like the deep woods and wide grasslands had never forgotten the footprints of their lost child. They were happy to see him again. The wounds on Leopard's body slowly healed over time, but memories, both good and bad, stayed deeply etched in his head. Leopard was sitting still in the sunset on top of a small hill with a view of the whole area. As the sun slowly went down behind faraway hills, his spotted coat looked even more beautiful than before. His amber eyes, which had been filled with fear and worry before, now had the calm and majesty of a king who had taken back his country. In the savannah, soft breezes brought the smell of earth, grass, and life in full bloom. Leopard took deep breaths and let the smells fill his senses. These smells confirmed that he really belonged here, not in the cold iron cages of the choking concrete walls, but in this endless open space. A group of gazelles grazed peacefully at the base of the hill, not knowing that a dangerous animal was watching them. Lion wasn't in a hurry. He learned how to be patient while he was being held captive, and his wild sense taught him how to wait for the right time. He was sure he could wait all night if he had to. But not everything went back to the way it was. Leopard changed the way it talked to people in a small way. Researchers in the reserve said that Leopard seemed to be able to tell the difference between people, even though most leopards avoid people because they see them as a danger. Most of the time, he would hide in the deep bush with tourists and strangers. However, Leopard would sometimes let experts who had lived and worked in the reserve since before he was taken see him from a distance. This was a sign of silent acceptance. It was even better when they were together with Michael Harrison. After getting Leopard back, Michael chose to stay in Africa. "I can't leave this place," he told Elena. "Not when I know he's out there somewhere." He did know that Leopard needed freedom to get back to his wild side and live the life he was meant to live. But that didn't stop him from going deep into the reserve sometimes to check out places he knew Leopard liked to go. Michael never tried to get too close to Leopard or bother it during these times. He did nothing but sit there, sometimes reading and sometimes taking notes, and let the nature around him envelop him. And every once in a while, Leopard would show up. It was always safe for the Leopard to get close. He stayed away from the man who had saved his life and would sit or lie down on a high rock to watch him. Michael would talk to Leopard in a soft, deep voice about everything and nothing since their last meeting. He would talk about progress and protection, new animals found, and everything else. "I know you might not understand every word," he would often say, "but I think you understand the intention, and that's what matters most, isn't it?" Michael was sitting by a small stream one afternoon when he heard a soft sound behind him. Leopard stood there, about 10 meters away, closer than ever before. He wasn't by himself. There was a young female leopard next to Leopard. The spots on her body made her look like an African spotted leopard. She stood behind Leopard and looked at the strange person who didn't scare her mate with careful interest. Michael didn't move at all and barely dared to breathe. Leopard told his family this was an honor that had never been seen before. Michael said in a whisper, "She's beautiful. You've done well, my friend." Lizard's ears moved when it heard Michael's words. For a moment, they stood there, the human, the leopard, and the leopard's fur, in a way that went against everything we know about how people and wild animals should interact. After what Michael had learned to be Leopard's signature small nod, the two cats slipped back into the tall grass and were gone just as quietly as they had come. Michael saw the female cat from afar many times in the years that followed. The backup staff gave her the name Stella, which comes from the names of stars that Michael had told Leopard about when they first met. A year later, camera traps caught pictures of cubs, tiny, active bundles of fur, playing close to their parents who were watching. The circle of life went on. The park got bigger, in part because Michael's writings about his special relationship with Leopard got attention around the world. Because of what they learned from their friendship, new ways of protecting wildlife were put in place. Leopard stayed free and wild the whole time, but he was still linked to people through his special bond with Michael. 10 years after the rescue, Michael sat on his favorite rock one last time on his last trip before retirement. He was getting old and watching the African sunset paint the savannah in shades of gold and yellow. His body was weaker and his hair was all white, but the love in his eyes for this place and its creatures was still the same. As night fell, a familiar form came out of the tall grass. The leopard, who was also nearing the end of his life, moved slowly, like an old hunter. His once bright coat had lost some of its shine, but those amazing amber eyes still showed the intelligence and honor that had always made him who he was. Following behind him were not cubs, but young adult leopards. They were his offspring, the next generation of guards for this land. Leopard got closer than he ever had in the wild and stopped not far from where Michael was sitting. They looked at each other for a long time. They were old friends who had changed over the years but were still linked by something that couldn't be explained. There was no need for words. Michael could only read things in Leopard's eyes. They showed recognition, respect, and appreciation.
Lion may have seen the same thing in Michael's tears.
Leopard turned around and walked away as the last bit of light left the sky. His family stuck behind him. Michael would never see him again, but it didn't matter. It was like the story had come full circle. What the person and the leopard had shared had not only changed their lives, but it also changed how people thought about their connection with nature. Their bond showed that even though the gap between species seemed impossible to cross, it could be done with respect, patience, and kindness. And somewhere in the middle of Africa, a leopard's offspring would still walk the savanna. They might have an innate memory of the man who had saved their ancestor twice, which in turn saved their future.